Okay, so the first question is simply if you could say your name, where you are now. If you don't mind, you can say your age also. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm Nickei Falconer. I'm currently sitting in my living room in Christchurch, New Zealand, as the sun rises. I'm 58 years old. I have been a big Gestalt therapist for 30 years. It seems a long time to say that. Yeah. Yeah. What else would you like to know?
Yeah, we have like questions around, because it's few months of Gestalt, so
yes.
Would you say who you are as a human? What your qualities are?
My qualities. Okay. So I would probably describe myself as an outgoing introvert, and isn't it funny? I can tell you the things that I love doing. Let me think about my qualities. I like to laugh. I've got a good sense of humor. I like to be strength focused and positive focused rather than looking at the negative or what's not right. I'm quite organized, so I like to see how we could fix things rather than actually wallow in what's wrong. I have an innate sense of fairness, which can be very helpful sometimes and can be very unhelpful sometimes, because I can get into my 16-year-old punk girl and shake my fist very easily. I don't know how to describe this quality. I suppose I'll describe it by starting by what I do. I really like to connect with the earth. I like to connect with people. I really like that, and I think it's just such a privilege with our work that we do. I still am surprised that I'm not bored after 30 years. I love the kind of exquisite privilege that we have of being so intimately in people's lives and being able to come alongside them and help them to make the changes that they want to make. I just think, wow, there's, people often say to me, when they know the work that I do, when they find out the work that I do, they say, oh, don't you get bored working with people and their problems all day? And I think, wow, nobody has an idea unless you're in this work of what it's like to actually watch somebody grow in front of your eyes and watch them change and evolve and open their petals if they were a flower. It's just amazing. So I like that connection, and I really like that connection within the garden as well. For me, humans are part of the natural world so very much. Mm-hmm. And so much of what I've gardened since I was 7 years old, and being part of those rhythms for such a long time, I just see that there is a really clear parallel within some of the things that we do within our work, and how people evolve, and how they grow, and how they unfold and unfurl themselves. So and I'm kind of curious to pay attention to what people might bring in the springtime as compared to the autumn, or what happens for them in the winter. I think in some ways we've disconnected a lot from that, but I'm curious to pay attention and amuse myself with my own hypotheses about that. Yeah.
I like your laugh,
Yeah, thank you. People say that a lot, actually. And my daughter the other day, she's very much into drama. So she's 23 and I have a 29-year-old son whom I'm very close to. And we spend a lot of time together. And she does a lot of drama. So she often rents a laugh and says, Mum, could you come to opening night? Because we need your laugh in the audience. And drama mates will say, is your mum coming? And we'll be like, yeah, great.
Yeah. Yeah, you can really compete with Alan Singer. I don't know whether you've heard his laughing.
Yes.
Like leader.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, Alan and I are quite good friends. And so when we get together, there's a bit of a laugh fest that happens. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So you started saying what you love doing, and can you continue with that? What you
Sure. Like generally in my life or with Gestalt, what would you like?
In your life, still
generally in my life. Okay, so I'm really fortunate to live on a larger piece of land. It's not a farm. It's about a third of an acre or an 1,100 square meters. So I've lived here off and on for about 23 years, and we're in the inner city. So when we first bought it, and I was married then, so when my husband and I bought it, it was it was in the city, and it was considered just a little bit not very good, and nobody really wanted to live in the inner city. They wanted to live in the flash suburbs a little bit out, which had the new houses. And this is an old house in an old suburb. It's an old villa, old by New Zealand standards, so 1896. And so I've gardened here for that amount of time. So I feel very, very fortunate to be held and shaped by this land and by this garden, and to have an ongoing relationship with it. So I really like gardening, and I like growing vegetables, and I love cooking. So actually, when I was growing up, I wanted to be a farmer's wife and have 6 children. So now I'm not, but I kind of have the lifestyle that I want here. So we have a lot of people coming from overseas to help on the property. So either through woofing or help-hexing or workaway. So people from overseas will come and help out here, because there's a little bit too much for me just to do on my own. And I'd much rather be engaged in the development of the property rather than always having to keep tidying it up. So I do a lot of, I really like the kitchen to table, the garden to kitchen to table lifestyle, actually. Every day I go and pick a salad for my lunch, and for me that's a massive pleasure. It's just such a pleasure, and I never forget the privilege of that, actually. I'm always like, and I can do it. So I like that. I am involved in, I'm on the board of a community garden nearby, so that is that's funny. I just thought that there was a vibration. I don't know what happened, but I thought it was an earthquake starting. I love that skill holding that happens. I love when people come here and they learn about how to look after a garden, and they say, oh, when we go back, we're going to do X, Y, Z. And I think, yes, job done. And the same with the community garden. So I wanted to support that at a greater level, and I'm enjoying that for the most part. Sometimes working with the board is a little bit tricky, but that's okay. I'm sure everybody's nodding their head about that. I like reading. I write. I'm writing a book at the moment on sustainability, which just seems never ending. I'm actually over it, but it's not done yet. And I like I went to Iceland last year and was really taken by their wool work. You know, they just, every child learns how to knit in school. And every supermarket you go into, there's a wall which sells wool. And they have great pride and skill with their wool work. They do the most beautiful jerseys with these lovely kind of yolks and different colours, and they're called lopa pieces. And it reignited for me my love of working with wool. I had done that actually pre-quake and had stopped after the quake. And so when I got back, I bought a spinning wheel. I'm going to counter some of this wholesome stuff with some not so wholesome stuff, but I just kind of think of the picture that I'm creating at the moment, and yeah, it seems very homely. And it kind of is. I am kind of like that. So I bought a spinning wheel and I've been spinning, and I've just spun up a fleece, and I just went yesterday, the shops had opened and I could order something online to go and pick it up, and I'm going to start knitting again, which was really, for me, that's quite pleasurable. So I like being quite creative. Well, I like actually to counter some of the non-tangible work that we do within Gestalt. You know, one of the things that I realized probably about 10 years after I'd been working with clients was that I had a sense of frustration because I had nothing to show for my work. You know, people would come in and you do some amazing work together, and then they would go out into the world, and, you know, you would bless them goodbye. And, you know, there's nothing to show, there's nothing tangible. And so I realized actually to counter that, for me, it's really important that I do tangible things that I can kind of show my creativity with, or it's not even show, it's about actually have something to show for my creativity, for myself. Yeah. Yeah.
I guess I can relate to that in some ways. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
one more thing to what you mentioned also about the book. Is it related also to Gestalt therapy? Is it?
Of course, yes. Although it's for a general readership, so it's actually not for Gestalt readers, or Gestalt. That's not for them. They're allowed to read it, and I hope they do. But,
So I will
buy a copy for a friend. But,
I will for sure ask you about that, but I just wanted to check with you. Is it, yeah, okay. If I understand.
Of course, because Gestalt has been so much an influence in my life. So, you know, Gestalt therapists will recognize the Gestalt concepts threaded throughout it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the thing the thing about the creativity is also something. Yeah, I somehow. Yeah, I said I can resonate with that in this sense that I can see that, oh, I have such an urge to create, but I never in my life was I really a creator, in that sense that I wasn't good at music in particularly, or at art, but I like art and I like clothes, and clothes is something I really am fond of. So yeah, so this is inspiring anyway to hear what you are saying.
Oh, I envy you. I'm probably more at home in a hardware shop than a clothes shop, so I kind of admire people who can do the clothes thing.
Yeah. But, and okay, so let's move on with yeah, your life in general. Who had the greatest impact on your life, you know, as a human being?
Oh gosh, that's a big question, isn't it? I don't know if there's one person. In fact, there's not one person. Unless you put all those people who kind of loved me and who do love me and who have loved me into one conglomerate, that would be, yeah. I mean, different areas have different people. you know, that one of the people that comes to mind as far as my Gestalt journey is concerned, there are two people actually. And the first one is the person who introduced me to Gestalt first and foremost, who is Anne McLean, who some of the people watching this will know. And she was one of the instigators of the Gestalt Institute of New Zealand, which no longer exists now. And I was working in a health food shop, and she came in and was a customer, and we got to know one another, and that was the start, you know, that very kind of casual meeting. Amazing, eh? And she was honoured in 2006 in Vancouver at the AAGT conference. They had a Gestalt Elders of the World celebration, really, and invited her to be part of that. And I was talking to her at that time, around that time that she got the invitation, and she said, oh, I won't go because my husband's not very well and he doesn't want to travel. And I thought, oh, I'll go with her, I'll accompany her because that's important. And I was curious about going. I didn't really know anything about AAGT. So once again, her influence introduced me to AAGT. And, you know, for me, AAGT is home. It's one of my homes in the world. It's my Gestalt home. And so she was a person of great influence for me. And also my trainer was a woman called Dr. Jill Craddock Davies, and she was a psychotherapist, Gestalt psychotherapist. She trained in Philadelphia, and she was a psychiatrist as well. And she was humane and sharp and funny and fierce, and she saw that passion in me to work with people and just kind of took it and helped me sculpt it. And I am ever grateful. I still refer to her in my work. She was just so pragmatic and fiercely empathic with people and clever, and you know, I can remember one time we were supervising, and I had taken this person to supervision, and I was like, yeah, that should be right. I was trainee, and she kind of showed me all the underlying stuff that could be sitting there that, you know, suddenly, instead of just paddling in the water, I felt like I might be swimming with potential sharks circling underneath. And I went, oh my God. And she went, yeah, you've got it. And it's that lovely development of, my nascent therapist self. I really appreciate how she did that and how she modeled beautiful work with clients. Yeah.
Yeah, since you already started with this first woman, about how you did actually get to Gestalt. Is it like by this encounter with this first woman?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, with Anne McLean. Yes, it was, because I had got very sick in my early 20s and physically sick, and the hospitals hadn't been able to help me, but I found a naturopath actually who said, okay, do this, do this, do this. Mm-hmm. And I had been sick for 3 months, and then 10 days later I was like, and boom, better. And that was a kind of crisis for me. It was quite a big time and quite a big crisis. And my faith in the health system had been shaken quite strongly. And I realized that there was a interconnected and a more harmonious way of actually working with ourselves. And so I was very young, and I was on a soapbox about that, and I started working in the health food shops to learn more about our bodies and how we could work. And I thought I would train as a naturopath or a herbalist or something like that. And I was very impatient to find out what my vocation might be. you know, I worked in the health food shop for maybe 3 or 4 years, which was a long time to be impatient. And but as I worked in the health food shop, I feel sweet towards my younger self. I just can remember going, oh, I was like I was revving at the lights the whole time. The more I worked in the health food shop, the more I began to realize that there was a connection between people's thinking and their emotions and the way that their body was. Now that was a huge revelation for me. This was in the 80s. And I mean, that's known now. It's the mind-body connection. It's like, yeah, of course. But for me, that was like the sun bursting through the clouds and kind of illumination happening. And I began to, I was talking about this with Billy, and he was saying, oh, you were attuned to the people that were coming in. And I thought, yeah, actually I was. I started to get the sense of what was going on for them as they came in. Mm-hmm. And then Anne was a regular customer there, and she and I had always talked. And she said, I'm organising a couple of workshops. One is with a medical clairvoyant that you might be interested in coming to, and one is with a Gestalt guy who's coming from the States, because we're thinking that we might set up an institute here. So we're kind of just having some workshops to gauge the level of interest. And so I went to both workshops. Both were fascinating, actually. But at that time, there was a very holistic focus, or maybe it was from Anne, and this guy's name was Fred Gross. Maybe it was from them. But the physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual were taken into account at that time. And that, like, all of a sudden, I just got, oh, this is it. Great. I kind of recognized it. And I signed up for the training, which was happening about a year and a half later. So I was at the first day of the first workshop of the Gestalt Institute of New Zealand, and I was 3.5 weeks overdue with my oldest son. So I went to the first day and I didn't go back. I went into labour that night. So that was, yeah, and that was interesting because I was raising him as a baby and toddler at the same time as doing lots of study about attachment and Bowlby and Winnicott, and I could just see it in action. It was really fascinating. Yeah.
And you said something about this earlier on, also about this New Zealand Institute, Gestalt Institute. So it was actually established at that moment, and
1991.
1991, and it no longer exists. You said, yeah, in New Zealand, or
no, it folded about maybe 5 or 6 years ago.
Okay. So it is. Go on.
Oh, in part it lost some government funding for the students to take, and that kind of was the death knell of it. Yeah.
And but there is this Australian and New Zealand now.
Yes, GANS. So GANS is an organisation. Yeah, GANS is an organisation, and I'm not part of it. I used to be, and I was quite involved. I edited the journal for almost 5 years, or co-edited the journal for 5 years, with both Leanne O'Shea and then more recently Richie. Well, that was a long time ago. GANS is it's not a training institute. It's how would you describe it? Like a professional, a Gestalt interest group or community.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not a training institute. Okay, so
no. A lot of training institutes belong to it, but it's not a training institute in the
And now, as a Gestalt therapist there in New Zealand, would you like to have this institute back, or like because you said that AGT is your home, Gestalt?
Yeah.
would you like those times with training institute be back in some ways? I mean, like, or
I don't know. I don't know if there would be the business here to support it. Actually, pragmatically, I just don't think that there would. Gestalt is not one of the mainstream psychotherapies in New Zealand, and psychotherapy is only in the last few years, probably since 2008, has started to be recognised within funding of New Zealand health areas. So, psychotherapists can be employed now and we're registered, but up until that time it wasn't really, it was seen as a kind of sideline thing,
Okay.
And still, things like brief intervention counselling are still really funded. So things like, the one that, CBT, no, what is it called? Cognitive behavioural therapy, yeah, CBT. Yeah, because it's seen as brief intervention and effective, and that's mostly what's funded within the health systems here. Although we do have a system called ACC here, which is the Accident Corporation Commission, and they fund for the recovery of mental injury from either physical injury or sexual injury. And so there's a lot of work within our profession here in New Zealand doing sexual abuse recovery. So I think it's one of the only countries, or it's one of the few countries in the world that fund for the recovery of sexual abuse.
Okay.
And some mental abuse from physical injury. So for example, if somebody had a car accident and they went into a deep depression for months, they could get funded counselling.
Okay, and continue with this Gestalt adventure, 30 years, as you said now. So who, well, maybe not who, but what what attracted you mostly, or what attracted you most in the past, or did that change throughout these years within Gestalt therapy, within Gestalt practice? What was the most attractive for you and attracted your attention, your whole being?
Yeah, so when I met Gestalt therapy for the first time, it was the holism in it that really made sense to me. It really resonated, it fitted. There wasn't anything, there weren't any rough edges. I've enjoyed the progression of development of theory, and I now really like that it's not so individualistic, that there's a field component, and I've loved Malcolm Pallett's field theory. Yeah, that's been great. And he refers to systems theory, and I really like that as well. In New Zealand, because I was talking about this with one of my Gestalt colleagues here in Christchurch. She and I share an office together. Her name's Jane Catherine Severn. She and I were talking the other day about, because we were both going to go to the conference in Ireland this year. Even if the conference stays in September, we won't be going because our borders will be shut. But it's kind of we were saying here, look, we've been quite fortunate here in some ways, because we're like free range chooks. We've been left to our own devices for a long time, and we've roamed in different paddocks. So one of the things that has influenced me a lot is the Indigenous culture here. We have a really strong Indigenous culture, so that has really influenced me. They're very much more holistic and have a different worldview than maybe mainstream developed world thinking. It's probably how I want to put it, even though I'm not insinuating that they're undeveloped in any way. I think but I'm not saying the opposite of that, actually. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the consideration of the land as a living entity has been very influential. So that's not so much Gestalt, although that does fit with field theory. When I sit within my country and am influenced by the Indigenous population, that we have an active treaty partnership with them. Yeah.
It's just don't want to cut into, but it's surprising then how, I mean, like next to this indigenous culture and lives, you know, or is growing up this as you said, right-wing conservative sphere or domain. Could you just explain this shortly?
Yes.
Yeah, because I
will, and also that comes from our conversation before. So for the people who are watching, we were talking, Camilla and I were talking before we started recording about how we have a very good Prime Minister at the moment. I think we have a very good leadership team, and she really stands embodying both clear direction, and she's not scared to make some really hard calls with empathy, and I think she models that really beautifully. Prior to her being in government, so that she was elected 3 years ago, and her term is coming up, and I'm hoping she'll get re-elected. We had a very right-wing government, and somebody who, a Prime Minister who was very interested in just kind of asset stripping and making more dollars. And we have a very strong component of New Zealand society which is very kind of conservative and right-wing, and really just not so interested in preserving a country or giving equal rights to Māori. More interested in actually making money seems to be the motivating belief. So yeah, it's not without its tensions. You know, it's not without its tensions.
Yeah, because I asked you about that because on the one hand there is this somehow uniqueness of New Zealand, this impact of this indigenous culture, and yet on the other hand there is this well, how to put it, diffusion of globalization in a way, with this I imagine with this right-wing conservative and neoliberal mixture. Yeah, is it
like it really is a bicultural collision? It really is, and it's about how do you balance caring and market forces.
But you are like so you are not like like one individual between the two. I imagine that you are like a representative of some in-betweeners, I don't know, some other domain between the two.
I mean, to think that there's just that and that is
obviously not, but it's easier to describe the society. But I wonder who is the in between, you know, who is in the middle. Are people like I don't know, middle class people, or who are they? Rather left wing, or it's maybe difficult.
I think it's probably I don't know the word. I think it's probably not as compartmentalized as that. You know, I know my own kind of right wing, and you know, I've internalized that right wing and racism as well as my lefty side. You know, I think that Yeah.
Mm.
Okay, Miriam Taylor, who was doing the trauma work, she was out here in New Zealand a couple of years, last year, beginning of last year, gave me this beautiful shawl. And she was saying that she did a workshop and said that she is racist. Of course she's racist because she's growing up in a white middle class family.
Yeah.
And so she has entrenched racism that she's not aware of. So I think there's, to think that there's us and them, I think is probably part of the.
Okay. Yeah. Just to give to have an image of the society, as I told you. I know almost nothing, so it's interesting.
Well, please come.
Yeah, and please come and please read first, and I will for sure, and somehow start a new conversation and engage you in another conversation.
Yeah, I'd love that. That would be great. And you're very welcome.
Thank you.
We're a big house here. There's plenty of room, so yeah.
Thank you.
We're a friendly lot, actually, New Zealanders. New Zealanders like visitors. We're at the bottom of the earth, and if people get to come here, which lots of people do, they always say how friendly people are. They'll.
Thank you for this.
Someone will pick you up hitchhiking, and then they'll take you out in their boat, or they'll, you'll be sharing in a farm up the back country or something. So yeah.
Well, I am already somehow attracted. So I'm lost now in okay.
Yeah.
We were somewhere around
More rebellions. Yeah, we were about Gestalt. Yeah, go back to your questions, Camilla.
You partly said about your attraction within Gestalt therapy, and
yes,
and then I wondered also about your involvement. And your contribution, and if you could say more.
So actually, I'd like to go back to the last question in a very politely rebellious way, if that's okay. Because probably one of the bigger influences for me also within Gestalt has also been the land and the earth. So I want to acknowledge that. You don't live in New Zealand with everything that we have here without actually being influenced by. Well, I think you'd have to be fairly blind. So for me, it's been a big influence. Yeah, both my garden and also the land that I live within. My involvement in Gestalt. Was really involved in GANS for a number of years, the Gestalt Australia and New Zealand, and I co-edited the journal there. Since becoming part of AAGT, I've been involved in a number of different things, which is a really lovely way to interact with people, isn't it? I like that. So, most recently I've been on the conference planning committee. We've had a sustainability, we call it the Ecological Edge Committee. There's been 5 of us on that, which has been really good. And lovely being part of that international community of people working towards a common goal. That's been really quite profound to be part of, actually. Currently on the election committee with Marlene and Gayla, and there's 5 or 6 of us on that, and that's a stunning group of people. Honestly, it warms my heart to be part of that, and also to see what's possible working together. The social activism interest group, I don't know. Am I answering your question? That's some of the involvement that I've
I
had.
am also, yeah, obviously I may ask you some, but because about this
Yeah.
sustainability, because before
Yeah.
we started to record, you mentioned your book, and I would really like our viewers and listeners yeah,
Yeah.
know more.
So, okay. What is the question? Sorry.
Question is about the book, about the book. You
What am I?
yeah.
What am I writing?
Yeah.
Okay, it's about. So I think that the climate crisis that we're in is actually bigger than a climate. I'm going to get passionate now, so just interrupt me if I'm raving. I've been known to get out the whiteboard at dinner parties, so I never get invited back. So yeah, I really believe that our climate crisis is actually much bigger than a climate crisis. It's actually a crisis of disconnection, which has its tendrils through economics and social connection, politics. It's not the climate crisis is actually a symptom of what the crisis is, in my view. And I'm really interested in you know, we work with people all the time, so how do we bring that back into the room? I'm really interested in how do we notice that the climate crisis is happening within people? So for me, I believe that we have a biodiversity as a human being as well. And how do we recognize that and how do we work with that? And some of my presentations at the conference have been about that, at the AEGT conferences. So my book is about how do we grow sustainability from within inside ourselves so that we can kind of potentize our energy and actually re-resource ourselves and then work in the realms that we inhabit. So my book is in 3 parts. The first one is heart. So that's about how do you grow sustainability within yourself. The next one is hearth. Hearth is where you build the fire yeah. So that's in the realms that we inhabit. So that our hearth realms are anything that we are in contact with and relate with. And you know, the quality of our relating will actually either grow or erode our sustainability. So and then the third section of the book is called Earth, and it's about how do we actually, from where we are without being overwhelmed and feeling disempowered and feeling like we're too small to make a difference, how do we actually work with healing our earth? And we can't do that on our own. We have to do that with other people. We have to collaborate. It's part of the individualistic lie and disempowerment to think that we can do that just ourselves. But we can contribute powerfully, I believe.
So you said in the beginning, I mean, before the recording, that this, you know, with Gestalt, notions or Gestalt terminology, but it is all, but it is mainly for, you said, for whom? Not only for not based.
Well, yeah, for Joe Blogg's reader.
And this, you said it's over. I mean, you finished it, or it's
no, I didn't say it's finished. I said I'm over it. Bugger. No. Yeah. In part, I've been working on this for about 4 years, and it's a long time, and I've been working all through the lockdown. The last 6 weeks or 7 weeks, I've been working really steadily on editing it, and I've got to say that I would much rather be out playing in my garden and skipping amongst the autumn leaves than sitting at a table actually doing writing. Yeah, That's just the...
but it sounds really well, interesting and well ordered. I mean, well, or yeah,
Yeah.
thought of
Yeah.
in terms of. I
Thank
like
you.
it. So I
Thank you.
first
Thank you. That's encouraging. Thank you.
somehow to
I
apply.
need you to talk to my editor.
Okay. Wow. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. So
Yeah.
what somehow made you start the writing a book? You know, a book.
Okay, I tell you what
Yeah.
started it was I was out in my garden and I had this lovely little peach tree and I grew it from seed. It's a white freestone peach. It's very nice to eat and it's either just off the tree or to cook up. And I had been watching this little I'd been watching this little peach tree, and it was a little bit earlier than now, so it was coming into autumn, and I could see all of this fruit ripening on the tree, and I just thought, oh, this is going to be lovely. Look at you, you know, you're doing so well. And I went out one day, and one of the boughs of the tree, one of the big branches, had actually split off and gone onto the ground because the weight of the peaches was too much for it to hold. And I felt very sad about that. I felt very sad. I felt a little bit remiss as a gardener. And since then, I've been propping the branches to just hold the weight so that that doesn't happen. But this is many years ago. It was pre-quake, so the quakes happened in 2011. So the quakes were probably another big influence, I've got to say. And so I was working with clients at the time who had massive output happening in their lives. You know, they were doing a lot, but they were also cracking under the weight of what they were trying to produce. And I was really caught by that parallel. Mm-hmm. And I thought, you know, like, that just got me pondering for a long time. It really got me pondering for a long time. And I thought, if we're like a tree, you know, our roots and our trunk are like our ground, and you know, the amount of nourishment and support that we can give ourselves is really supportive of what we then produce. And our neoliberal world would have us producing until we cracked, and then it would just cast us aside and get another tree, you know. But I don't think that's a quality way of doing things. It doesn't kind of honour the life in each of us or each of the trees. So it just got me really pondering about that, and out of that the whole thing grew. Mm-hmm. It was interesting because I was sorting through photos a few years after that, like maybe 2015, and I'd already started writing the book, and I was tidying up all those photos, you know, that you have for years, and you probably don't have them, they're probably all digital, but I've got them back from years ago, and I saw a piece of artwork that I'd done with heart, half earth on it, and it was on the wall of the old cottage that I used to live in, and I thought, oh, that's interesting, like it was even there around back then. So yeah, but consciously it came, you know, it started. It was a small seed that grew.
Okay. Yeah, so now you have no other option but to, you know, publish it and show it. Yeah, it's like.
Hopefully I'll publish it. So if anybody's watching this and they have a publishing company and would like to, or they're an agent, I'm very happy to hear from you. And I do have an option. I can put it down at any time. I need to keep reminding myself that, because it's a choice to continue.
I mean, like we Gestalt therapists, we really pay attention to the figure that is, you know, emerging and getting clearer. But maybe sometimes it's about closing. It's about closing. But I don't know. We'll see. I hope.
Well, I also think that one of the things in Gestalt therapy that might be really good to consider more, and it was one of the invitations I put out in the Budapest conference, is to consider about the ground that somebody is coming from. We very rarely consider the quality of somebody's physical health. So a lot of my work now in Christchurch is actually to do quite an in-depth assessment of their physical health, and if people are actually caught in the flight, fight, freeze mode, I'll suggest that they go and get the support that they need to get off that, and to re-resource their body so that they're in a better place to be able to let me start another way. Like Gestalt often relies on or inquires about what somebody's experiencing. But if they're caught in the flight, fight, freeze mode, what they experience will be informed by that. And I don't think that we take that into account enough.
Okay.
It's the same disregard for the earth. We just kind of expect that it will be okay. There's a disconnect there.
So I am even more now interested in the book.
Good.
Yeah. Yeah. It is somehow. Yeah, it is important, this perspective you are now describing. I mean, it's banal to say this, but yeah, to say this way as you are putting it, and to a larger community as ours. I mean, to the world, of course, but firstly to those who are the closest. I mean, yeah, somehow, and to share. I mean, I like the way you are. It's really somehow, yeah, it's somehow engaged me in some way. And sometimes
lovely.
speaking about, I don't know, climate and earth, it's really like very abstract. I don't know how to put it.
Yeah,
It's really
isn't
that
it?
don't resonate. I find it really hard, and
Yeah. I understand that. Yeah, like it's so out there, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, and yet, everything that we needed to do for climate change, we did like that for a pandemic. The world shut down for 3 months. And so we can do it. I think that's part of the difficulty about mobilization of action towards climate repair, is that it just seems so out there. But when you bring it back into where we are, it's one part of it.
Yeah, and those parallels that you are making with individual and with relations, I don't know, it's not that, I mean, very new, but and yet I like I don't know, I feel really I can
lovely, thank you. That's very encouraging. Thank you for
yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, I have had some headache this afternoon, and that's why it's not easy for me to elaborate this on. But maybe if you find it helpful in any ways, or anyway, I would be interested to read even some extracts or really. But yeah, maybe.
Thank you.
It's for the recording, but
I really feel, thank you, I feel that. From Poland to New Zealand, there's no distance. It's lovely, thank you.
Okay, we we need to continue. So, how would you say, how has Gestalt therapy affected you as a person?
Gosh.
Yeah, I know.
What a big question. Oh, it's formed me. I can say that, and it's informed me, and it's formed me, and it's held me, and it's abrased me. especially in the early training days. You know, they were a bit harrowing, I've got to say. It's a harsh world back then. Yeah, no, it's central to how I live, really. So, yeah, I don't know how much that is Gestalt and how much that's me meeting Gestalt. I can remember, yeah, this is probably a side comment. I can remember a few years ago, before she died, meeting Jill Craddock Davies again and going, "Oh, hello, I want to say thank you." And she said, "Oh, are you still working as a therapist?" And I said, "Yeah, but I don't know if I'm doing I don't know if I'm doing Gestalt therapy anymore. I think I'm doing Nickei Falconer therapy." And she went, "Then you're really doing Gestalt." And I thought, "Oh, great, that's lucky." So, yeah, yeah. I think that's the nice thing about Gestalt, isn't it? It's not like something that you apply to something or someone. It's actually something that you inhabit. I believe, and so yeah, I've inhabited it, and it's inhabited me.
And what do you think will happen to Gestalt therapy in the next few years, in the next decades?
Well, I've got no idea.
Yeah.
We watch this space, won't it? I really don't know. I know what my hopes are. I know what some of my hopes are.
More.
Yeah, I hope that more conversations happen about environment. I think we need to get a lot more socially active, and I think there's room for that, and I think we're uniquely poised as Gestalt therapists to do that. I feel tremendously excited about the skill base that we've got and the experience that's within our Gestalt worldwide community to actually assist people, both with the impacts of living in an unsustainable way, because let's face it, the neoliberal capitalist model of living is not sustainable. Kind of hurtling towards many extinctions. So I would hope that connectedness with other than human becomes a central part of Gestalt.
Good for ending. I like the sentence. It's like and
yeah. Boom, boom.
Yeah.
No, I don't think it should be an ending. I think it should be ... Watch the space.
But seriously, it has its value and it has its weight. I mean it.
And Camilla, will you edit this, because this is very long? I'm feeling for the people who might watch this, and like we've been talking for probably an hour. That's quite a long time, isn't it?
Yes.
Do you edit these before you put them up?
No, but I guess but we may end up here. I mean, I will stop the recording.
Yeah,
because it was the last question. Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, so you're going to end it there. That's kind of nice, yeah.
Yeah. So that's why. Yeah, I mean, I planned to end it with this question, but I didn't know you are going to say such an ending phrase or.
Nice.
Anyway, so thank you very much.
Oh, Camilla, it's been such a pleasure. Thank you so much for asking me, and it's lovely to have the opportunity to speak. Thank you.
Yeah.
And the thing is that I don't know how far away the book will be and my book will be in coming into the world. And it may not birth. I might write it and I might not get a publisher or an agent, but I'm really happy to do workshops about this, and I like to travel. So once once the world is a little bit more available, I like to. If I'm coming to a conference, I'm happy to do a workshop somewhere. So
Right,
yeah, that would be fun.
mm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and can talk about what that might be.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, you're right. So anyway, thank you. It was really like yeah, very I mean, yeah, kind of a wave of a new voice, I would say.
Great.
So I really enjoyed that, and it was really somehow.
Thank you.
Mm,
Thank you. Because sometimes, when I go to Gestalt conferences, I can hear people talking about the latest theory or, kind of development of theory, and I sometimes haven't read that. We are a little bit isolated here in some ways, and also sometimes I just don't want to. I want to go and work in my garden rather than read the latest thing. So actually, you saying that for me is quite encouraging. Sometimes it's easy to feel like everybody knows all this and I am not an imposter, that's too big a word, but kind of I have been free ranging and I'm like, oh, what are you talking about? Oh, yeah. So that's really encouraging. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so let's stop.
So you're going to go to bed and try and get rid of your headache.
Yeah, but I will stop here and come back to you because only stop the recording.
Oh, okay.